The absence of technology suggested either supreme arrogance or hidden capability. Either they believed they needed no tools to negotiate, or they possessed methods the triumvirate couldn't detect. Z's tactical mind ran through possibilities: subdermal implants, remote neural links, or perhaps they simply remembered everything. Human memory capacities remained poorly documented in triumvirate intelligence files. Their body language redefined the room's dynamics without a word spoken. They leaned slightly toward each other, creating a united front. Their postures remained open but not submissive. They watched the triumvirate officers with the same analytical attention the triumvirate gave them. The psychological warfare was masterful. They had taken a chamber designed to intimidate and turned it into neutral ground through sheer behavioral defiance. Z felt the negotiation parameters shifting already. The humans hadn't just broken protocol, they had established new rules through silent demonstration. Their lack of equipment suggested they either didn't need records or didn't trust triumvirate systems. Their clustering implied unity rather than hierarchy. Their calm demeanor signaled preparation rather than apprehension. This was no ordinary diplomatic engagement. These weren't representatives coming to negotiate terms. They were assessors, evaluators. They had entered not to bargain but to observe how the triumvirate would present its case. The realization settled cold in Z's stomach. They were testing us from the moment those doors opened. He straightened his uniform jacket. The protocol officers waited for his signal to begin the formal greetings. The humans watched him, their expressions unchanged. Wilson's smile remained, neither widening nor fading. It simply existed as a fixed point in the chamber's new reality. Z gave the slightest nod. The lead protocol officer stepped forward, datapad in hand, ready to commence the programmed welcome ceremony. The human's eyes shifted to the officer, their attention complete but somehow detached, as if observing a cultural performance rather than participating in a negotiation. The stage had been set for submission. Instead, they delivered a silent declaration of parity. Commander Zainarovo activated the holographic display. A star map materialized above the negotiation table, crisp and authoritative. Blue zones marked triumvirate territories. A small red sector pulsed in the Orion Arm, humanity's proposed containment area. The boundaries were sharply defined, the margins intentionally narrow. Z noted the economic incentives layered along the borders: trade corridors, resource-sharing agreements, technology exchanges. The offer looked generous until you examined the spatial constraints. He delivered the terms with measured precision. Each clause reinforced containment: limited expansion corridors, fixed territorial margins, monitoring stations along all approach vectors. The language echoed historical subjugation agreements, the kind imposed on civilizations that needed managing. Z's military mindset approved. Clear borders prevented misunderstandings. Defined zones reduced conflict variables. This was strategic architecture, not diplomacy. These terms are non-negotiable, he stated flatly. The Council's instructions had been explicit. No flexibility on territorial limits. The economic incentives were sweeteners, not bargaining points. They assumed human desperation for resources and space. The triumvirate intelligence profiles suggested humans would prioritize immediate gains over long-term freedom. They'd trade expansion for stability. Or so the analyst claimed. Z watched the human delegation. Wilson's expression didn't change. Her two companions remained still. They showed no reaction to the restrictive borders or the implied surveillance. No disappointment at the limited zones. No enthusiasm for the economic offers. Their calm felt unnerving. They were listening, but not as subordinates receiving terms. They were evaluating strategy. The treaty was a cage dressed as a partnership. She understood the design. Contain the unpredictable species. Channel their energies into controlled spaces. Use economic dependency to ensure compliance. It was a classic triumvirate approach. Manage emerging civilizations before they became threats. The humans' rapid expansion had triggered every alarm in strategic command. This response was predictable, almost doctrinal. Wilson leaned forward slightly. The holographic light caught her eyes, but they revealed nothing. She placed her hands flat on the table. Not aggressive, not defensive, simply present. The room's atmosphere shifted. The psychological advantage the triumvirate had engineered through architecture and ceremony began to dissipate. She hadn't spoken yet, but her posture communicated volumes. She felt the first flicker of doubt. His tactical assessment had predicted several human responses: negotiation attempts, appeals for expanded territory, arguments about resource needs. Silence wasn't on the list. Complete assessing silence. The humans weren't reacting to the terms. They were studying the term givers. The economic incentives lay on the table like unclaimed trophies. Resource sharing, technology transfer, market access. These should have been leverage points. Instead, they felt like misplaced offerings. Wilson's companions exchanged a brief glance. Some unspoken communication passed between them. She recognized the look, soldiers signaling readiness, advisors confirming assessment. This wasn't proceeding according to doctrine. The humans should have been engaged by now, arguing boundaries, questioning monitoring protocols, seeking concessions. Their continued silence undermined the entire presentation. The holographic map suddenly looked less like a strategic offering and more like a confession of anxiety. Why contain something that wasn't a threat? Why restrict a civilization that followed rules? Wilson's smile returned. Not broad, not friendly, a slight curve at the corners of her mouth. She looked at the map, then at Z, then back at the map. Her head tilted slightly. The gesture wasn't confused. It was analytical, as if deciphering code. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm even, without aggression or submission. Commander Zenorovo, she began. Let's discuss why your government is so afraid of a species that hasn't started a single interstellar conflict. The words hung in the air. The negotiations' foundation cracked. Ambassador Wilson's voice cut through the chamber's manufactured gravitas, without raising in volume. You have come unprepared? She asked. The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. Or is it that you have noticed something about us that frightens you? Z felt the protocol officers freeze. This wasn't how negotiations began. Accusations weren't part of the script. Her calm delivery contrasted sharply with the aggressive terms he'd just presented. She hadn't addressed the borders or the economic incentives. She'd gone straight to the foundation of the triumvirate position. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes moving from Z to the other triumvirate delegates. Your intelligence reports must show 0 human-initiated interstellar conflicts. We've expanded, yes. We've explored. But we haven't conquered. We haven't subjugated. Yet you offer us what amounts to a reservation. The word landed like a physical blow. Reservation. Not territory. Not zone, reservation. He found himself speaking before he'd formed a proper response. The triumvirate acts to prevent conflict, not respond to it. Containment is standard procedure for emerging spacefaring species. The word sounded hollow even to himself. Standard procedure. Based on centuries of dealing with predictable civilizations. The humans hadn't followed any established pattern. Wilson's expression remained neutral. Procedure based on what evidence? Your fear seems disproportionate to our actions. We noticed discrepancies in your data presentations. She gestured toward the holographic displays that still showed triumvirate military deployments. Certain conflict records appear absent. Certain patterns seem edited. The psychological advantage shifted visibly. Z watched his own delegates glance at each other. They'd all seen the intelligence briefings. They'd all noted the anomalies. The humans weren't just observing. They'd done their homework. They'd analyzed triumvirate data with a precision that shouldn't have been possible. You question our intelligence sources? Z asked. He kept his voice level through sheer discipline. This was dangerous territory. Questioning intelligence meant questioning the council. Meant questioning orders. We question everything, Wilson said. Her companions nodded slightly. The man, Dr. Bell, spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, technical. The absence of certain conflict records suggests either incomplete data collection or deliberate curation. We'd like to understand which. Z felt the negotiation transform beneath his feet. This was no longer about terms. This was about truth. The humans had bypassed the entire diplomatic framework to attack its foundation. They weren't arguing about border measurements or resource shares. They were challenging the very reason for the negotiation's existence. The chamber's designed intimidation suddenly worked against the triumvirate. The dark walls felt oppressive rather than impressive. The holographic displays of military might seemed like boasts rather than demonstrations. The humans had taken a perfectly staged production and revealed the scaffolding behind it. Wilson's questions forced examination of things best left unexamined. The intelligence sources. the analysts who prepared the briefings, the council members who approved the containment strategy. Z found himself mentally reviewing reports he'd skimmed, conversations he'd dismissed. The inconsistencies he'd attributed to bureaucratic error now seemed more significant. The negotiation became a different kind of engagement. Not about compromise, but about verification. Not about agreement, but about accuracy. The humans had reframed the entire discussion with a few simple questions. They'd exposed the unspoken fears driving triumvirate policy. The fear of unpredictability. The fear of adaptation. The fear of a species that didn't follow established patterns. She looked at the data screens displaying human expansion corridors. The lines seemed arbitrary now. The restrictions felt reactive rather than strategic. The humans had successfully shifted the burden of proof. Instead of justifying their expansion, they'd made the triumvirate justify its fear. The room's atmosphere changed from formal negotiation to something closer to an interrogation. But the humans weren't the ones being questioned. They were doing the questioning, and their questions were better than any arguments could have been. Wilson watched him, her expression still calm, waiting. The ball was in his court, but the court itself had just been redesigned. Dr. Bell waited until the triumvirate's lead analyst finished the data presentation. He didn't interrupt. He simply observed, his gaze fixed on the holodisplays showing conflict statistics and threat projections. When the analyst concluded, Bell leaned forward slightly. His voice remained low, technical, devoid of accusation. "Your report omits the Korthos incident," he stated. "Not a question. A simple observation." The analyst blinked. "That engagement remains classified pending review." Bell continued as if he hadn't heard. "Also missing, the Viridian the 3 border skirmish where human vessels withdrew after identifying the system as sacred ground to a pre-spaceflight culture, and the complete absence of any data on human mediation efforts during the Kral succession crisis." He listed each omission with clinical precision. No emphasis, no drama, just facts stacking like evidence. Sif felt the chamber's atmosphere shift. His own analysts had flagged these same gaps weeks earlier. They'd been told the data was being curated for diplomatic presentation. Standard procedure, they were told. Remove sensitive operations, streamline the narrative. But seeing the pattern laid out so calmly by the human specialist made it feel less like curation and more like fabrication. Dr. Bell's manner suggested he knew far more than he revealed. He didn't press, didn't demand explanations. He simply noted the absences as if cataloging specimens. His calm professionalism contrasted sharply with the growing discomfort among the triumvirate delegation. Officers shifted in their seats. Analysts avoided eye contact. The perfect presentation now showed visible seams. The data integrity question undermined everything. If the conflict records were incomplete, then the threat assessment was flawed. If the threat assessment was flawed, then the containment treaty had no foundation. She watched Bell's hands. They remained still on the table. No fidgeting. No nervous gestures. The man operated with the quiet certainty of someone who had alternative sources. Better sources. Z's own doubts resurfaced. He'd questioned the intelligence briefings himself. The human expansion patterns didn't match typical aggressive civilizations. They spread rapidly but didn't consolidate power. They explored but didn't exploit. Their military deployments focused on defense, not offense. The reports had emphasized theoretical capabilities rather than documented actions. Bell turned slightly toward Z. "Commander, your analysts must have noted these discrepancies. The population growth projections in Sector 7 don't match observable migration patterns. The military capability assessments appear based on worst-case simulations rather than observed behavior." He stated it as fact, not accusation. The humans clearly had their own intelligence network, one that penetrated triumvirate data streams or accessed raw information before curation. Their confidence wasn't bluff. It was based on verified evidence. They'd come not to negotiate terms but to validate suspicions. The negotiation stalled. The triumvirate's position relied on the credibility of their data. Now that credibility was evaporating under Bell's quiet scrutiny, officers began murmuring among themselves. The protocol structure broke down as delegates questioned their own briefing materials. Watched Wilson. She sat perfectly still, observing the disintegration of triumvirate certainty. Her expression remained neutral, but he saw the assessment in her eyes. She was measuring the depth of the deception, determining whether this was institutional corruption or isolated manipulation. The session ended with no progress. The humans requested a recess until morning. They needed time to review the provided materials, though everyone understood they were really giving the triumvirate time to confront its own data failures. As they left the chamber, Z noticed Bell exchange a brief nod with Wilson. Some unspoken confirmation passed between them. They'd accomplished what they came for. They'd exposed the cracks in the foundation. The second day would bring revelations, not negotiations. Ambassador Wilson placed a simple metallic cube on the negotiation table. It gleamed under the chamber lights, its surface smooth and featureless except for a single activation interface. Dr. Bell leaned forward, his voice retaining its technical calm. This contains intercepted communications from your own secure channels. Approximately one standard year of conversations between certain triumvirate officials and private interests. The cube hummed softly as it activated. A holographic transcript began scrolling beside it. Z recognized command-level encryption markers immediately. These weren't leaked documents or second-hand reports. These were raw intercepts from secure military communications. Bell continued as the data unfolded. We possess 17 similar recordings. Each confirms a pattern of systematic manipulation, rather than isolated incidents. The words hung in the chamber's sudden silence. Protocol officers stopped adjusting their equipment. Analysts froze mid-motion. The triumvirate delegation became perfectly still. She scanned the first transmission. Admiral Telix's command signature appeared alongside corporate identifiers from the Sion conglomerate. The language was explicit. Discussion of falsified threat assessments, manipulation of intelligence reports, direct references to influencing council decisions. The evidence suggested coordination at the highest levels of military and corporate power. The chamber's atmosphere shifted completely. Negotiation protocols evaporated. This was no longer about territorial disputes or resource allocation. This was confrontation. The humans hadn't come to bargain. They'd come to present evidence of corruption that reached into the triumvirate's core. Pax spoke from beside Z, her voice tight with realization. The environmental impact assessments, the resource allocation projections, they've been engineered. She pointed to a specific passage where Admiral Telix stated, "Once the humans are contained, the Council will have no choice but to grant emergency resource extraction permits." The statement laid bare the conflict of interest, security concerns masking economic ambitions. Wilson watched Z's reaction closely. "We are not here to negotiate a containment treaty. We are here to address a conspiracy that threatens both our peoples." Her words reframed everything. The humans weren't the threat. They were fellow targets of manipulation. The real enemy operated from within triumvirate power structures. He felt the negotiation framework collapse around him. The carefully prepared terms, the strategic positioning, the entire diplomatic engagement became irrelevant. The humans had bypassed the official narrative to present raw truth. Their gamble was clear. They believed Z would prioritize evidence over obedience. The data kept unfolding. Message after message showed coordination between military leadership and corporate interests. Discussions of manipulating conflict records, plans to steer council decisions through selective intelligence sharing. The pattern was too consistent, too detailed to be fabrication. The humans had somehow accessed the triumvirate's most secure communications. Z looked from the holographic evidence to his own officers. Their expressions mirrored his own dawning comprehension. They'd all operated on assumptions of institutional integrity. Now those assumptions lay shattered beside the glowing data cube. The humans had not just challenged their position, they'd undermined their entire understanding of reality. The chamber felt different now. The impressive architecture seemed like a stage set. The military displays looked like props. The humans had exposed the machinery behind the performance. They'd revealed that the real negotiation wasn't between species but between truth and corruption. Wilson's team sat quietly, allowing the evidence to speak for itself. They'd presented their case not with arguments but with facts. The cube's gentle hum became the only sound in the room. A year of secret conversations laid bare, 17 more cubes waiting to be examined. A conspiracy systematic enough to threaten civilizations. He stood slowly, his eyes fixed on the scrolling transcripts. The path forward was clear. Verification came before negotiation. Truth before duty. The Galactic Triumvirate's peace talks were meant to contain humanity. But when 3 humans arrived without datapads or recording devices, Commander Z Norovo realized this was no ordinary negotiation. They clustered at the table, disrupting. The symmetrical delegation, and Ambassador Tara Wilson wore a calm smile that felt more like a challenge. What did they know that we didn't? Commander Z Norovo read the orders a second time. His fingers tightened on the datapad. The Triumvirate Council wanted him to lead negotiations with the humans. They had chosen a military commander for a diplomatic mission. Z saw the contradiction immediately. His entire career had been built on clear threats and decisive force. Negotiation required patience and subtlety he frankly lacked. His aide, Pax, stood nearby, watching his reaction. They want your reputation behind this, Commander. The humans respect strength, Z snorted. Respect? They're like children testing boundaries. Push until someone pushes back harder. He'd seen their expansion patterns. Rapid, chaotic growth across multiple systems. No regard for established protocols or buffer zones. Pax countered with the standard briefing points. Their population pressures are real, Commander. They need resources in space. The containment treaty offers both, just within limits we control. The Korthos incident hung between them unmentioned. Everyone in command remembered Korthos. A human colony ship had entered a restricted system, ignored warnings, and when triumvirate forces moved to intercept, the humans didn't retreat or surrender. They adapted, used stellar radiation and asteroid fields as cover, executed maneuvers no simulation had predicted. They lost ships but achieved their objective. That incident had rewritten entire chapters of strategic planning. Historical failures made the Council cautious. Every civilization the Triumvirate had encountered followed predictable patterns of development. Technological advancement, territorial expansion, eventual integration or containment. Humans skipped steps. They'd achieve warp capability before establishing unified planetary government, develop weapon systems without proper testing protocols. Their progress looked less like advancement and more like controlled chaos. Z's reluctance wasn't personal. He believed force would be more effective than negotiation. Show them a fleet of warships, not a treaty document. Demonstrate the consequences of crossing established borders. The humans understood demonstrations. They respected capability, not words. But orders were orders. The Council had chosen him precisely because he wouldn't be swayed by human appeals to emotion or shared destiny. His job was to present the terms, enforce the boundaries, and return with their signature on the containment agreement. He handed the datapad back to Pax. Prepare the negotiation team. I want full tactical analysis of their delegation members, psychological profiles, negotiation histories, everything. Pax nodded. The venue is already secured. Outpost Kappa. They're preparing the main chamber now. Z looked toward the observation port. Stars drifted past in the endless black. He'd rather be facing human warships than human diplomats. At least in combat, the rules were clear. Let's get this over with, he said. The words sounded tired even to himself. This wasn't choice. This was duty. Another mission in service of the Triumvirate's eternal stability. He turned from the viewport. The bridge hummed with familiar activity. His crew knew their roles, their stations, their purpose. Soon he'd be in a room designed for talk instead of action, surrounded by diplomats instead of soldiers. Have protocol send me the reception ceremony details. I want to review everything before we arrive. Pax made a note. They've been drilling it for 3 cycles already, Commander. Every movement timed, every word measured. Z almost smiled. At least some things followed proper procedure. The humans would enter a perfectly choreographed display of triumvirate power and precision. Maybe that would be demonstration enough. Outpost Kappa loomed before them as their shuttle approached. The station didn't just occupy space, it commanded it. Sharp, angular architecture, dark polished surfaces that reflected starlight like weapons. Every line spoke of power. Every angle suggested control. This was the Triumvirate's preferred negotiation venue for a reason. It impressed. It intimidated. It reminded lesser species of their place. The main chamber felt like a cathedral to authority. Vaulted ceilings stretched upward into shadow, making even triumvirate officers appear small against the scale of their own creation. Lighting fell in precise cones onto the negotiation table, leaving the periphery in deliberate darkness. The air hummed with subtle energy fields that dampened sound and heightened focus. Gravitic stabilizers ensured everyone felt just slightly heavier here, more grounded, more aware of the power surrounding them. Z walked the perimeter as protocol officers made final adjustments. 3 delegation stations faced a single human position. The symmetry represented everything about triumvirate thinking. Hierarchy, order, clear understanding of who led and who followed. The architects had studied psychological impact surveys from a dozen previous negotiations. They knew how to make visitors feel both honored and overwhelmed. Polished obsidian walls displayed shifting holograms of triumvirate history. Fleet deployments at Cyrillus, the annexation of the Viridian systems, the pacification of the Kryl uprising. Each victory played out in silent, relentless procession. No sound, just the visual demonstration of centuries of unchallenged dominance. The message needed no translation. This is who we are. This is what we've accomplished. This is what opposes you. Z adjusted his uniform. The fabric felt stiff, ceremonial. He preferred battle dress. At least that served a practical purpose. This outfit existed solely to impress, to demonstrate triumvirate refinement alongside their military might. He watched junior officers rehearsing the reception ceremony for the 4th time. Precise angles of approach, exact timing of gestures, specific vocal cadences for the formal greetings. They moved like components in a machine. Perfect, predictable, entirely triumvirate. He expected the humans to enter wide-eyed. He anticipated the slight hesitation as they took in the scale of the chamber, the nervous glances toward the military displays, the careful measurement of their words as the environment pressed down on them. This was how negotiations began, with the other side already understanding their subordinate position, with the terms already framed by unspoken context. Protocol officers positioned data screens at each triumvirate station. They showed current fleet deployments along human expansion corridors, live feeds from observation posts monitoring human colony worlds, resource production statistics from systems near human space. The implication hung in the air like weaponized silence. We watch you. We measure you. We contain you. The stage was perfectly set. Every psychological advantage belonged to the triumvirate. Every environmental factor tilted toward their preferred outcome. Z took his position at the center delegation station. The chairs were designed to be slightly higher than the human seating. Another subtle dominance signal, another calculated detail in the theater of power. He checked the time display. The human shuttle had docked 7 minutes ago. They should be proceeding through the security screening now. Then the long walk down the approach corridor with its implied threat displays. Then finally here, to this chamber, to this table, to this moment where they would understand the reality of their situation. The main doors hissed slightly as pressure equalized. Z straightened his posture. The protocol officers fell into their final positions. The visual displays shifted to show triumvirate flagships on patrol patterns. Perfect timing, perfect presentation. Everything proceeded according to doctrine. Then the doors opened. 3 humans walked through the doors. Not 12. 3. They carried no data pads, no recording devices, no visible technology of any kind. Their hands remained empty at their sides. Ambassador Tara Wilson led them, her stride measured, her expression neutral. 2 others followed, a man and a woman, both scanning the chamber with calm assessment rather than awe. Z felt the protocol officers tense. This broke every established procedure. Delegations arrived with documentation. They brought advisors, specialists, recording equipment. They prepared to take notes, reference data, maintain communication with home vessels. These humans entered as if visiting a market rather than a galactic negotiation. They moved to the table but ignored the prepared seating arrangement. Instead of distributing themselves across the 3 designated positions, they clustered together on one side. Wilson took the center chair, her companions flanking her closely. The symmetry of the chamber, so carefully designed to emphasize triumvirate hierarchical order, collapsed instantly. Wilson's smile showed small white teeth. It wasn't the formal diplomatic expression Z expected. It held no deference, no gratitude for the honor of this meeting. Her eyes moved across the triumvirate delegation, pausing briefly on each officer as if making assessments. Her calm felt deliberate, calculated. The woman beside Wilson had the watchful stillness of military training. Z noted the way her weight, balanced evenly, her hands resting where a weapon might normally be carried. Commander Narovo spent the night in the secured intelligence suite adjacent to the negotiation chamber. His access code still worked, bypassing the normal diplomatic restrictions. He began with the raw data streams, the unfiltered intelligence feeds that never reached council briefings. The human's cube data shimmered on one display while triumvirate secure channels filled another. Cross-referencing began. Each verification deepened the betrayal. Message timestamps aligned perfectly. Encryption signatures matched. Admiral Telix's command ident appeared repeatedly alongside corporate markers from the Sion conglomerate. Z watched conversation after conversation unfold. Discussions of falsified threat assessments, manipulation of resource allocation projections, direct references to influencing council decisions through selective intelligence sharing. The pattern showed deliberate steering of triumvirate policy. Not random corruption, systematic manipulation, economic interests driving military and diplomatic decisions. Z pulled environmental impact reports that had been dismissed as unreliable. They showed the proposed human containment zones overlapped exactly with known resource deposits the Sion conglomerate wanted to exploit. The containment strategy wasn't about security. It was about resource acquisition. He accessed his own private intelligence network, operatives he trusted from frontline postings. Their raw field reports contradicted the official briefings. Human expansion followed predictable patterns when you removed the fabricated threat data. Their colonial efforts focused on adaptation rather than conquest. Their military deployments emphasized defense over aggression. The evidence had been there all along, buried beneath layers of curated presentations. Admiral Telix's coordination with Sion became unmistakable. He found promises of mining rights in exchange for pushing the containment agenda, references to personal benefits for certain council members, discussion of manipulating conflict records to justify military presence in resource-rich sectors. The conspiracy reached deep into triumvirate leadership. This wasn't a few rogue officers. This was institutional corruption. He faced the reality without flinching. His duty required confronting this truth, however uncomfortable. The oath he'd sworn was to the triumvirate's principles, not to corrupt individuals. The humans had presented evidence, not accusations. They'd allowed him to verify rather than demanding belief. Their approach respected his integrity while challenging his loyalty. The scale of deception became clear. Entire threat assessment teams had been compromised. Intelligence analysts fed manipulated data. Council members received filtered briefings designed to provoke specific responses. The humans had been framed as aggressors to justify seizing territory they hadn't even claimed yet. The containment treaty was a land grab disguised as security policy. He compiled his findings into a secure data packet. Encryption within encryption. The evidence was incontrovertible. Message logs, financial transactions, manipulated reports alongside originals. The human's cube data matched his independent findings perfectly. They hadn't fabricated anything. They'd simply exposed what his own people had hidden. Dawn approached on the station's artificial cycle. Z sat back from the displays. The truth changed everything. The negotiation was a sham. The real conflict wasn't between species. It was between integrity and corruption within his own civilization. The humans had known this from the beginning. They'd come to see who would choose truth over obedience. His duty was clear now. Not to the council as it stood. Not to compromised admirals or corrupt corporations. His duty was to the triumvirate's founding principles. To the civilization he'd sworn to protect. The humans had offered evidence instead of threats. They'd presented truth as their opening position. That changed the entire game. He transmitted the secure packet to his most trusted officers. Then he prepared to return to the negotiation chamber. The conspiracy's full scope remained unknown, but its patterns were clear. Economic interests had hijacked security policy. Private profit had masqueraded as public protection. The humans weren't the threat. They were witnesses to the betrayal. Ambassador Wilson's team pulled up a galactic map, but this one showed something entirely different. Not borders or resource claims. Connections, lines of influence stretching between star systems, corporate entities, and shadowy groups with no clear origin. The Sion conglomerate doesn't act alone, Wilson stated. They are proxies, middlemen for interests we haven't yet identified. Dr. Bell took over, his fingers moving across the interface. The map shifted, highlighting conflict zones across the Orion Arm and beyond. These are not random conflicts. They are engineered, false flag operations designed to destabilize emerging civilizations. He pointed to specific systems where initial intelligence reports had suggested external aggression. Further analysis revealed those attacks originated from within, using technology provided by outside sources. The patterns were too consistent, too strategically timed to be coincidence. They call it the Great Harvest, Wilson said. The term landed with chilling precision. It is not a metaphor. It is a systematic process of exploitation. The operation targeted civilizations at specific developmental stages, just as they reached technological maturity and resource abundance. The strategy involved engineering internal strife or external conflicts that would weaken them, making them vulnerable to economic and political takeover. The harvested resources and technologies were then funneled back to the Shadow Network. Triumvirate legends suddenly felt less like mythology and more like warning. Ancient texts spoke of seed civilizations planted across the galaxy, left to develop until they reached peak potential, then harvested by unknown forces. The stories had been dismissed as superstition. Now they seemed horrifyingly plausible. The technology and strategy involved exceeded anything ordinary rival civilizations could muster. This was not about territory or dominance. It was about systematic multi-generational resource extraction on a galactic scale. The threat expanded instantly. This was not a regional conflict, not a border dispute. This was a hidden war being waged against developing civilizations across known space. The humans had uncovered the pattern by analyzing conflicts the Triumvirate had dismissed as isolated incidents. They'd found the common threads, the same corporate intermediaries, the same technological signatures, the same exploitation patterns. Z recognized the implications immediately. The containment strategy would have played directly into the Harvesters' plans. By isolating humanity and restricting their growth, the Triumvirate would have made them easier targets. The same economic pressures used to justify containment would have been exploited by the Shadow Network. They'd been manipulated into weakening a potential ally against the real threat. Wilson's expression remained grim. This is not about human expansion or Triumvirate security. This is about the survival of multiple civilizations. The Harvesters operate in cycles. They target, weaken, and consume. Then they move to the next emerging culture. The scale of the conspiracy became clear. This was why the humans had come without recorders or data pads. This was why they'd focused on truth rather than terms. They knew the real enemy wasn't in the negotiation chamber. The resolution was obvious now. Containing humanity would have made both species vulnerable. Cooperation offered the only path to uncovering the full network and developing countermeasures. The humans had not come to negotiate a treaty. They had come to propose an alliance against a common, hidden enemy. The peace talks were never about peace between their peoples. They were about survival against a threat neither could face alone. The chamber felt different. The impressive architecture seemed insignificant against the scale of the revelation. The military displays looked like toys compared to the sophisticated manipulation they now faced. The humans had redefined the conflict. They'd shifted the focus from territorial disputes to existential threats. From negotiation to survival. He looked at the galactic map with new eyes. The lines of connection now looked like a web, a trap designed to ensnare developing civilizations. The Triumvirate's fear had been directed at the wrong target. Their policies had been manipulated to serve the very forces they should have been opposing. The humans had not just presented evidence. They had provided context. The Great Harvest was real, and it was already underway. Dr. Bell projected the before and after images of Nueva Terra. The transformation was stark. A world once characterized by a toxic atmosphere and extreme temperature fluctuations now showed blue oceans and green land masses. Cities sprawled across continents that had been barren wastelands 15 years earlier. The humans had not just colonized the planet, they had remade it. The triumvirate's colonial record stood in sharp contrast. Their attempts showed a 78% failure rate within the first decade. The humans boasted a 93% success rate. The numbers spoke for themselves. The difference wasn't resources or technology. It was approach. The triumvirate tried to force environments to conform to predetermined parameters. The humans adapted their methods to fit each unique world. The Blue Ocean Metropolis construction demonstrated practical capability. The humans didn't build sealed domes or underground habitats. They transformed the atmosphere itself. They altered soil chemistry. They introduced tailored ecosystems. Their colonial success came through understanding environments, not conquering them. They worked with planetary systems rather than against them. This example proved human technological superiority in environmental development. Their methods focused on adaptation rather than domination. They studied each world's unique characteristics and developed solutions specific to those conditions. The triumvirate's rigid protocols failed when faced with unexpected variables. Human flexibility allowed them to overcome challenges that would have doomed triumvirate colonies. The demonstration undermined triumvirate assumptions about human limitations. The initial intelligence assessments had portrayed humans as reckless expansionists. The reality showed careful methodical development. Their expansion wasn't chaotic. It was precisely engineered. Each colony represented not just occupation, but transformation. They turned hostile worlds into habitable homes. They studied the images. The scale of the achievement was undeniable. The triumvirate had abandoned several systems with similar environmental challenges. They'd deemed them unsuitable for colonization. The humans had made them thrive. Their techniques could revolutionize triumvirate expansion efforts. The potential benefits were enormous. Wilson watched the triumvirate delegates process the information. Containment would waste this capability, she stated. Cooperation would share it. The implication was clear. The humans weren't just offering peace. They were offering advancement. Their methods could improve triumvirate colonial success rates dramatically. The choice was between limiting both civilizations or advancing together. The resolution became obvious. Cooperation offered better outcomes than containment. The humans had demonstrated practical benefits beyond theoretical threats. Their environmental transformation techniques represented tangible value. The triumvirate's fear-based approach had blinded them to potential gains. The humans presented opportunity where the council had seen only risk. The chamber's atmosphere shifted from confrontation to calculation. Delegates began discussing resource sharing, scientific collaboration, joint colonial ventures. The human success rate made their methods worth studying. Their adaptability offered solutions to problems the triumvirate had considered unsolvable. The negotiation transformed from conflict management to partnership formation. The example redefined the relationship dynamics. The humans weren't supplicants seeking favors. They were equals offering value. Their technological prowess in environmental engineering complemented triumvirate military and organizational strengths. Together, they could achieve what neither could alone. The galaxy's challenges required flexible thinking and adaptive solutions. Ze recognized the strategic implications. The harvesters targeted developing civilizations. Human adaptation techniques could create resilient colonies less vulnerable to manipulation. Their methods offered defense through sustainability rather than through fortification. Cooperation wasn't just beneficial. It was strategically necessary against the hidden threat. The humans had successfully demonstrated that their greatest strength wasn't expansion. It was transformation. They didn't just occupy space. They made space livable. This capability changed everything about interstellar development. It turned dead worlds into assets. It turned environmental challenges into opportunities. The Nueva Terra example completed the reframing of the negotiation. The humans had exposed corruption. They had revealed the true threat. Now they demonstrated their value as partners. The progression was masterful. Fear gave way to truth. Truth gave way to opportunity. The path forward was clear. Ambassador Wilson projected a new map over the negotiation table. The Orion Arm glowed with proposed protected zones and demilitarized buffer regions. No containment borders, no restricted corridors. Instead, overlapping spheres of mutual interest stretched across star systems. The design showed careful thought about natural resource distributions and cultural boundaries. This wasn't about limiting expansion. It was about managing co-development. Joint scientific missions formed the initiative's core. Shared research stations, combined exploration teams, open data exchange on environmental adaptations. The proposal included resource-sharing compacts based on surveyed deposits rather than claimed territories. Human ships had already charted many regions, identifying resource wealth that could support both civilizations for centuries without conflict. The zero-sum negotiation mindset evaporated under practical cooperation frameworks. The initiative addressed the real threat while offering clear benefits. Human technology and techniques would be shared openly. Atmospheric processors, soil enrichers, adaptive construction methods. These weren't theoretical promises. The Nueva Terra example demonstrated proven capabilities. The Triumvirate's colonial failure rate could be dramatically improved. Their expansion efforts could succeed where they'd previously faltered. The proposal turned fear into shared advancement opportunity. Containment would have made both sides vulnerable to harvesters. Isolated civilizations presented easier targets. Divided resources created weaknesses the shadow network could exploit. Cooperation created mutual protection. Combined intelligence networks could uncover the full extent of the conspiracy. Shared technology could develop countermeasures against false flag operations. The framework offered strategic advantage against hidden threats. Demilitarized buffer zones reduced tension points where harvesters might engineer conflicts. Joint patrols could monitor regions vulnerable to manipulation. The resource-sharing compact eliminated competition that could be exploited. Scientific collaboration accelerated defensive technology development. Every aspect of the initiative strengthened both civilizations against the common enemy. Z studied the proposal. The logic was sound. The containment strategy had been based on flawed intelligence and corrupted motives. This approach recognized the actual galactic situation. The humans weren't seeking dominance. They were offering partnership. Their technological strengths complemented triumvirate organizational capabilities. Together they could achieve what neither could alone. The alliance decision point arrived. Z looked at his officers. They'd all seen the evidence. They'd all verified the corruption. The choice was between supporting compromised leadership or embracing a new path. The humans had presented not just an alternative treaty, but an alternative future, one based on truth rather than manipulation, on cooperation rather than fear. Pax secured the chamber as alliances shifted. Her security teams quietly isolated communications, ensuring the discussion remained confidential. The humans' determination to restart with accurate information resonated deeply. They hadn't come to defeat the triumvirate. They'd come to save it from its own corruption. The choice became clear: failed containment versus potential survival. Ziu's perception shifted from compliance to leadership. His oath was to the triumvirate's principles, not to corrupt individuals. The broader duty required action against systemic betrayal. The humans had demonstrated both the threat and the solution. Their adaptability wasn't just a human trait, it was a survival necessity. The galaxy demanded flexibility against unknown dangers. The Orion Initiative represented more than a treaty. It was a strategic pivot, a reorientation from internal suspicion to external vigilance, from manufactured conflicts to genuine cooperation. The framework offered protection against the harvesters while advancing both civilizations. The choice was no longer about accepting or rejecting terms. It was about embracing reality and acting accordingly. The chamber became very still. Every delegate understood the significance. This wasn't a negotiation anymore. It was a decision. The evidence was clear. The proposal was solid. The alternative was continued vulnerability to manipulation. The humans had redefined the conflict and in doing so, had redefined the solution. Commander Zenorovo faced the decision point. His oath to the triumvirate weighed against the evidence of systemic corruption. Supporting the human initiative meant bypassing compromised leadership. It meant acting against direct orders from superiors he now knew were manipulated or complicit. The choice wasn't between duty and rebellion. It was between blind obedience and true service. His oath was to the triumvirate's founding principles, not to corrupt individuals. The evidence showed Admiral Telix and others had subverted those principles for private gain. They'd manipulated intelligence, falsified reports, and engineered conflicts to serve corporate interests. Z's duty required action against this betrayal, even if that action defied the chain of command. Sometimes duty requires more than following orders. The broader responsibility became clear. Protecting the triumvirate meant confronting the corruption within it. Allowing the containment treaty to proceed would have served the Harvester's goals. It would have weakened both civilizations, making them easier targets for exploitation. The real threat wasn't humanity. It was the shadow network manipulating them all. Pax secured the chamber with quiet efficiency. Her security teams isolated communications, ensuring their discussion remained confidential. Other triumvirate officers began aligning with Z's position. They'd all seen the evidence. They'd all verified the data discrepancies. The alliances within the room shifted from hierarchical obedience to principled cooperation. The humans watched, allowing the triumvirate officers to reach their own conclusions. Wilson's determination to restart with accurate information resonated deeply. She hadn't demanded compliance. She'd presented evidence and allowed verification. Her approach respected their integrity while challenging their assumptions. The humans had risked everything on the chance that truth would prevail over protocol. Their gamble was paying off. The choice crystallized into stark terms: failed containment versus potential survival. Continuing with the corrupted treaty would have led to mutual vulnerability. Embracing cooperation offered defense against the real threat. The Harvesters preyed on divided civilizations. Unity provided protection. Adaptation became necessary for civilization survival. Z's perception shifted fundamentally. He moved from compliance to leadership, from following orders to making decisions. The transformation felt both terrifying and inevitable. His career had been built on discipline and obedience. Now he exercised judgment that superseded both. The evidence left no alternative. The corruption went too deep, the threat was too real. He looked at the assembled officers. Their expressions mirrored his own resolution. They understood the consequences. Supporting the initiative meant challenging powerful interests. It meant potential court-martial, possible exile, but it also meant honoring their true duty, protecting the triumvirate from enemies within and without. The humans waited patiently. They'd achieved what they came for. Not surrender, not submission, understanding. They'd exposed the truth and allowed the triumvirate officers to choose integrity. Their approach demonstrated respect for the very principles the corruption had undermined. Z made his decision. He would support the Orion Initiative. He would help draft a new alliance based on accurate intelligence and shared goals. The containment framework was abandoned. In its place, they would build cooperation against the real threat. The Harvesters had manipulated fear to divide civilizations. They would use truth to unite them. The resolution settled over the chamber. Adaptation wasn't just desirable. It was essential. The galaxy demanded flexibility against unknown dangers. Rigid adherence to compromised protocols would lead to disaster. The triumvirate itself needed to evolve to survive. The humans had demonstrated that adaptability wasn't weakness. It was strength. Evidence compilation became the next priority. They needed to document everything thoroughly. The case against the corrupt elements had to be airtight. The alliance required a solid foundation of verified intelligence. Porter and Bell began organizing the data streams. Raw intelligence, intercepted communications, financial records. The pieces came together to form a damning picture. The chamber transformed from negotiation venue to operational headquarters. Tables became workstations. Displays showed evolving intelligence patterns. Officers who minutes earlier had been preparing diplomatic statements now analyzed military deployments and corporate connections. The shift was complete. Peace talks had become strategic planning against a common enemy. Commander Zé Narovo and Ambassador Wilson began drafting the alliance document. The table between them filled with data streams and protocol references. Their movements were efficient, their communication clipped. They worked from opposite sides of a galactic divide, but their purpose had aligned completely. The initial peace talks framework lay discarded. A new structure emerged from verified evidence and shared necessity. Major Porter provided raw intelligence feeds. She cross-referenced military deployments with corporate activity patterns. Her analysis showed the Sion conglomerate's movements matching Harvester operation timelines. She highlighted fleet positions that could be redirected to monitor vulnerable systems. Her tactical assessments formed the Alliance's defensive backbone. She worked with grim focus, her expression tight with the weight of what they faced. Dr. Bell built the strategic architecture, His model showed harvester operation cycles across multiple civilizations. He mapped resource extraction patterns and false flag incident correlations. His data visualizations demonstrated how containment would have played into harvester strategies. His calm technical explanations provided the logical foundation for every alliance provision. He moved between displays, connecting dots others had missed. The plan required presenting a united front to the full council. This presented the greatest challenge. Admiral Telix and other compromised members would resist. They would question the evidence. They would protect their interests. Z and Wilson structured the presentation to bypass objections. They built their case on irrefutable data. They prepared to isolate the corrupt elements through sheer weight of evidence. Evidence compilation became the foundation. They gathered intercepted communications, financial transaction records, manipulated intelligence reports alongside originals. Each piece reinforced the others. The pattern showed systematic corruption, not isolated incidents. The harvesters had infiltrated multiple levels of triumvirate operations. The Alliance needed to address this infiltration while building defenses against external threats. The Alliance would confront harvesters rather than fortify rivalries. This represented a complete strategic pivot. Resources would shift from border patrols to joint task forces. Monitoring would focus on corporate activities rather than civilian movements. Intelligence sharing would replace information control. The approach recognized the real enemy operated through manipulation rather than direct confrontation. Hours stretched as details were negotiated and documented. Protocol officers revised language. Legal experts reviewed jurisdictional boundaries. Military planners coordinated deployment schedules. The chamber hummed with focused activity. What began as a negotiation became an operational planning session. The line between diplomacy and strategy blurred into insignificance. The immediate action was necessary to prevent harvester exploitation. Every delay risked another civilization being targeted, another resource system being manipulated. The Alliance included emergency response provisions, rapid reaction forces, intelligence alert networks, contingency plans for false flag incident intervention. The urgency drove their work forward through fatigue and doubt. The chamber became headquarters for a galactic reorganization. Displays showed real-time intelligence updates. Communication channels remained open to trusted ships and stations. Officers who hours earlier had been adversaries now coordinated logistics. The physical space transformed from ceremonial venue to command center. The symbolism was unmistakable. Old divisions gave way to new cooperation. The resolution settled over them gradually. Peace talks became the beginning of true cooperation. The confrontation had revealed shared interests outweighing differences. The harvesters threatened all civilizations. Only unity provided adequate defense. The Alliance document grew into a comprehensive framework for joint survival. It addressed immediate threats while building long-term collaboration. They prepared to present their case to the full council. The evidence was compiled. The strategy was mapped. The Alliance terms were defined. The chamber's atmosphere felt charged with purpose. What began as a containment negotiation had become a galactic realignment. The humans had not just changed the terms. They had changed the game entirely. Commander Z Norovo looked at the star map showing harvester operations. The true danger wasn't humanity. It never had been. The harvesters represented an existential threat to multiple civilizations. Their false flag operations could exploit any conflict, turning minor disputes into catastrophic confrontations. They'd been doing it for centuries, playing civilizations against each other, manufacturing reasons for warfare, then moving in to harvest the resources and technology of the weakened survivors. Containment would have made both sides vulnerable to this manipulation. Isolating humanity would have created the perfect conditions for harvester exploitation. Divided resources, mutual suspicion, limited communication. The triumvirate's fear had been systematically directed at the wrong target. Their intelligence apparatus focused on human expansion, while the real danger operated in the shadows. The strategic miscalculation was staggering in its implications. Human adaptability became their greatest asset against this hidden enemy. Their ability to improvise, to rethink problems, to develop unconventional solutions. These were the exact capabilities needed to counter harvester strategies. The harvesters relied on predictable responses. standard military doctrines, established diplomatic protocols. Humans broke patterns. They introduced variables the harvesters couldn't anticipate. Cooperation offered the only path to uncovering the full network. No single civilization had the resources or perspective to track the harvesters' operations. Their web stretched across multiple galaxies. Their methods evolved constantly. Only combined intelligence efforts could map their activities. Only shared technology could develop effective countermeasures. The scale of the conspiracy required unprecedented alliance. The resolution settled with concrete certainty. Facing darkness together replaced mutual destruction. The old paradigm of interstellar relations, suspicion, containment, controlled conflict became obsolete. The harvesters had exploited those very tendencies. They'd turned civilizations against each other for generations. Now that cycle would be broken. He studied the operation patterns Dr. Bell had mapped. False flag incidents across 12 sectors. Resource extraction following manufactured conflicts. The same corporate intermediaries appearing repeatedly. The evidence was overwhelming. This wasn't random predation. This was systematic exploitation on a galactic scale. The harvesters didn't just attack civilizations. They farmed them. The strategic pivot implications were profound. Military resources would need reallocation. Intelligence priorities required complete restructuring. Diplomatic protocols needed rewriting. The triumvirate's entire approach to interstellar relations had been based on flawed assumptions. They'd prepared for the wrong war against the wrong enemy. Human methods offered new possibilities. Their adaptive technologies could harden colonies against harvester manipulation. Their decentralized decision-making structures were less vulnerable to the kind of top-down corruption that had infected the triumvirate. Their willingness to share knowledge freely created stronger alliances than enforced treaties ever could. The Chamber's displays now showed joint task force deployments, combined patrol routes, shared monitoring stations. The old borders looked arbitrary against the new threat mapping. The harvesters didn't respect territorial boundaries. They operated across civilizations, exploiting divisions and weaknesses. Only unity provided adequate defense. Z felt the weight of the realization. Their previous strategies had been not just ineffective but counterproductive. Every border fortification, every intelligence restriction, every limitation on cooperation had actually helped the harvesters. The very measures designed for security had created vulnerabilities. The irony was bitter but necessary to accept. The transition was underway. Old fears gave way to new understandings. Suspicion transformed into shared purpose. The galaxy's true danger demanded nothing less than complete reorientation. The humans had not just revealed the threat, they demonstrated the only viable response. Adaptation wasn't optional. Cooperation wasn't idealistic. They were necessities for survival. The alliance became more than military partnership. It represented a fundamental shift in interstellar relations, from competition to collaboration, from secrecy to transparency, from fear to determination. The harvesters had relied on civilizations remaining divided. That advantage was now disappearing. Commander Xenarova watched the humans operate and understood something fundamental. Adaptation wasn't just a human characteristic. It was a survival requirement. The galaxy presented too many unknowns, too many variables. Rigid systems broke under unexpected pressures. The triumvirate's hierarchical structures and established protocols had become vulnerabilities. They were predictable. The harvesters exploited predictability. Human resilience offered practical lessons for triumvirate evolution. Their ability to turn apparent defeat into victory wasn't magic. It was methodology. They approached problems differently. When faced with obstacles, they didn't force solutions. They adapted strategies. The Korthos incident demonstrated this perfectly. A single mining vessel outmaneuvering a battle group through environmental adaptation, turning weaknesses into advantages. Ancient civilizations might have fallen due to inflexibility. The galaxy held ruins of once great empires that failed to adapt. They built impressive structures but couldn't evolve with changing threats. The harvesters specifically targeted rigid, predictable societies. They understood how to manipulate systems that followed set patterns. The more structured a civilization, the easier to control. Adaptive thinking provided protection against manipulation. Humans constantly questioned assumptions. They tested boundaries. They explored alternatives. This mental flexibility made them difficult targets for the Harvesters' psychological operations. Their decentralized decision-making allowed rapid responses to unexpected threats. No single point of failure. No predictable chain of command. The triumvirate itself needed to evolve to survive. Their entire approach to interstellar relations required reconsideration, containment strategies, border fortifications, information control. These were 20th century solutions to 25th century problems. The Harvesters operated beyond such limitations. They exploited the gaps between civilizations. They turned defenses into vulnerabilities. Z studied the alliance documents with new perspective. The proposed cooperation wasn't just political convenience, it was evolutionary necessity. Combining human adaptability with triumvirate organization created something stronger than either alone. The humans brought flexibility. The triumvirate brought scale. Together they could develop responses to threats neither could face separately. The galaxy demanded this evolution. Static civilizations became targets. Dynamic civilizations survived. The humans had demonstrated this through colonial success rates, through technological innovation, through strategic creativity. Their methods weren't just different, they were better suited to current galactic conditions. The Harvesters had forced this realization upon them all. Rigid hierarchies crumbled under asymmetric threats. The Triumvirate's command structure had been designed for conventional warfare. Clear enemies, defined battle lines, predictable engagements. The Harvesters operated through deception and manipulation. They attacked through economic pressure and false flag operations. Traditional military responses were ineffective against such tactics. Adaptive thinking became the crucial capability. The ability to recognize new patterns, to develop unconventional solutions, to learn from failures and successes alike. The humans excelled at this. Their entire expansion showed constant learning and adjustment. Each colony improved upon previous efforts. Each challenge produced new approaches. The resolutions settled with finality. The triumvirate required fundamental change, not just new policies but new thinking. Embracing adaptation meant re-examining everything. Military doctrine, diplomatic protocols, intelligence analysis. The humans had provided the demonstration. Now the triumvirate needed to implement the lessons. This evolution wasn't optional. Survival demanded it. The Harvesters would continue targeting inflexible civilizations. They'd find new ways to exploit rigid systems. Only adaptive thinking provided lasting protection. Only flexibility could counter their manipulations. The alliance represented the first step, but many more would follow. The galaxy had changed. Their responses must change with it. The chamber's atmosphere reflected this new understanding. Officers discussed possibilities rather than limitations. Plans embraced uncertainty rather than avoiding it. The humans had shifted their perspective from defense to adaptation. From fearing the unknown to preparing for it. This was the necessary evolution. This was how civilization survived galactic threats. Ambassador Wilson's approach didn't just alter the negotiation, it redefined interstellar politics entirely. Where the triumvirate had come to impose borders, she offered shared destinies. The conversation shifted from lines on a star map to mutual survival against a common threat. The Alliance's emerging motto, unity against broader danger, wasn't a slogan. It was a strategic necessity. This wasn't diplomacy as the triumvirate understood it. This was co-authorship of a new galactic reality. Human creativity turned what could have been the end of something into a beginning. The peace talks became a foundation rather than a conclusion. Their adaptive engineering techniques weren't just impressive, they were transformative. The example of Nueva Terra stood as proof. A hostile world remade through cooperation. Willingness to share that capability shifted the entire dynamic. It fostered mutual advancement where containment would have bred resentment. This was the practical expression of human resilience, not just surviving but enabling others to thrive. Commander Xenorovo felt his own perspective shifting in real time. His initial curiosity about these unpredictable humans transformed into something more significant, unifying courage. He saw beyond the uniform, beyond the rank. He recognized that multiple worlds could be safeguarded through this cooperation, not just human or triumvirate colonies, every developing civilization along the Orion Arm. The Alliance offered protection on a scale their separate strategies could never achieve. The old fear of the galaxy's vastness began to recede. replaced by a new understanding of its possibilities. The galaxy's size became opportunity, rather than limitation. Where they had once seen only potential conflict zones and contested territories, they now identified collaboration points. Joint research stations could be established in systems once considered too remote for individual operation. Shared monitoring networks could cover regions too expansive for any single civilization to patrol effectively. Resource deposits once fought over could be developed cooperatively, benefiting all involved. The scale that had seemed so daunting became their greatest asset against the Harvester's piecemeal strategy. Collaboration accomplished what fear could not. The containment approach would have weakened both civilizations. It would have created the exact conditions the Harvesters exploited: distrust, resource competition, isolated decision-making. By choosing cooperation, they built something stronger than the sum of its parts. Human adaptability combined with triumvirate organization. Their joint capabilities exceeded what either could achieve alone. They turned potential conflict into collective security. The chamber no longer felt like a negotiation room. It operated as a joint command center. Officers from both civilizations worked side by side. Data streams merged, strategies aligned. The transition from adversaries to allies happened not through surrender, but through shared realization. They weren't just signing a treaty. They were building a framework for galactic-scale cooperation against an enemy that preyed on division. Wilson watched the transformation with quiet satisfaction. Her team had risked everything on the chance that truth would prevail over tradition. That evidence would outweigh protocol. Their willingness to present the data cube to show their hand completely had been the critical gamble. It demonstrated trust where the triumvirate expected deception. It offered partnership where they anticipated demands. He finalized the alliance document with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. This wasn't about following orders. This was about doing what was necessary. The corruption within his own command structure would be addressed. The Harvesters would be confronted. But first, they had to present this new reality to the full council. They had to make the case for unity over division, for adaptation over rigidity. The work continued through the artificial night cycle. Maps were updated, deployment schedules coordinated, communication protocols established. The alliance took shape not as a paper agreement, but as an operational reality. They were building the mechanism that would allow them to face the Harvesters as equals, rather than victims. The peace talks had become something far more significant. The founding of a coalition that might just change the balance of power across the Orion Arm. Ambassador Wilson stood. The motion was calm, deliberate, not sudden, not aggressive. She rose from her chair and the peace talks ended. Just like that. The gesture marked a transition from negotiation to action. Her posture remained straight. Her hands rested at her sides. The movement conveyed determination rather than confrontation. It was a statement. A final commitment to truth over protocol. Commander Zinorovo recognized the moment for what it was. The point of no return. This was no diplomatic maneuver. It was a physical declaration. The human delegation had presented their evidence. They had offered verification. They had proposed alliance. Now they signaled that discussion time had ended. The standing moment represented a willingness to stand against corruption, to act on what they had uncovered. The chamber's atmosphere shifted instantly. The hum of data screens seemed louder in the sudden stillness. Officers paused mid-sentence. Protocol specialists froze in place. The transition from discussion to resolution happened without a word spoken. Every delegate understood the significance of this movement. The humans weren't leaving. They weren't protesting. They were waiting for the triumvirate to choose its path. Wilson's expression remained neutral. Her eyes held no challenge, only resolve. She had stood not to dominate but to demonstrate. The act symbolized a refusal to continue pretending. The corruption had been exposed. The evidence verified. The choice was now clear. Continue with the flawed containment strategy, or embrace the necessary alliance. Some negotiations end because they become unnecessary. The talking stops when the truth becomes unavoidable. He watched the other triumvirate officers. He saw their reactions. Some showed confusion, others understanding. A few revealed dawning acceptance. They had all seen the same evidence. They had all verified the data discrepancies. The standing gesture forced them to confront what they knew. The formal negotiation structure had become a barrier rather than a pathway. Wilson had removed that barrier with a simple physical action. The chamber felt different now. The impressive architecture seemed irrelevant. The military displays looked like historical artifacts. The real conflict wasn't in this room. It was out there, in the shadow networks, in the false flag operations, in the systematic exploitation of developing civilizations. The humans had redefined the battlefield with their evidence. Now they redefined the response with their stance. Z found himself standing as well. The motion felt natural, inevitable. His uniform jacket stretched across his shoulders. The fabric felt different now, less like ceremony and more like purpose. Other officers followed. First his immediate staff, then the analysts, then the protocol specialists. They rose not in submission but in solidarity. The gesture spread through the chamber like a silent wave. Wilson's team remained standing with her. They formed a united front, not against the triumvirate, against the corruption that threatened them all. Their calm determination became contagious. The atmosphere shifted from tension to resolution. The questions had been answered. The evidence examined. Now only action remained. The alliance needed formation. The harvesters needed confronting. The corruption needed cleansing. The standing moment became the true beginning of cooperation. All the previous discussion had been necessary preparation. The data presentation, the verification process, the strategic planning. But this physical commitment marked the actual transition. Words became unnecessary when action spoke clearly. The humans had shown their commitment through standing. The triumvirate showed theirs by joining them. The chamber filled with standing officers. The negotiation table stood empty between them. Chairs remained pushed back. Data screens continued displaying evidence of corruption. But the focus had shifted completely. They were no longer negotiators. They were allies. The peace talks had served their purpose. They had revealed truth. Now that truth required action, the talking had ended because the real work was beginning. The galaxy finally felt large enough for all civilizations when we faced its true darkness together. Human creativity redefined interstellar politics not through force but through evidence and adaptability. Their resilience turned confrontation into collaboration. The peace talks ended not in agreement but in understanding. The deeper realization that some negotiations become unnecessary when truth emerges. Standing together against corruption and hidden threats accomplished what diplomacy alone could not. Sometimes the end of talking marks the beginning of actual cooperation. The harvesters prey on division. Unity becomes our strongest defense.